If there are no further points of order, we come now to the 10-minute rule motion of Mr Paul Maynard.
Mr Speaker, I beg to move that leave be given to bring a bill to amend the Concessionary Bus Travel Act 2007 to broaden the definition of eligible journeys to allow people with complex mobility problems who cannot access public transport to use concessionary travel passes on community transport services and for connected purposes. Now, I am sure everyone in this chamber is aware of how much our constituents value the current concessionary travel scheme, even if we do tend to argue about it come election time. Indeed, I think few issues are more controversial perhaps than that. But I do believe that there is one particular imbalance in the application of the existing legislation that needs to be addressed. An imbalance, I fear, that was not in the minds of those who framed the legislation back in 2007. Able-bodied pensioners who can use existing public transport are able to use their concessionary travel cards without any problem at all. But if you have the misfortune to be a disabled pensioner or someone with complex mobility needs, who maybe cannot even make it to the bus stop in the first place, you may have to rely on dial-a-ride services, demand responsive services, or other forms of community transport. And in very many cases, you will have to pay your own way. Because, in essence, community transport as a sector does not benefit from the statutory benefits that the concessionary card scheme allows for. To me, this imbalance seems not only unfair, but contrary to the spirit of human dignity. Community transport as a sector ranges from the dial-a-ride services I've mentioned, wheels to work schemes for apprentices, demand responsive bus routes, community car schemes. There are at least 60,000 community transport volunteers up and down the country. One could argue it is a big society in action, no less. In many rural areas, as honourable members may be aware, Section 22 community transport services are beginning to fill a crucial gap that is appearing in the rural bus network. But my proposals specifically focus on those services provided under Section 19 of the 1985 Transport Act. This allows for not-for-profit organisations to charge passengers for providing transport to the people whom the organisation serves, without the need to obtain a public service vehicle operator's licence. This applies for any not-for-profit body associated with educational, religious, social welfare, recreational and other activities of benefit to the community. Now, I do understand that many councils have varying ways in which they seek to subsidise travel for those who are disabled, but not every council does. And indeed, with the increasing budgetary pressures that we all have to recognise on both sides of the House, I do fear that fewer and fewer will. And looking at my own constituency as an example, which is covered by 2 upper-tier councils, I see 2 varying ways in which their needs are fulfilled. If we take Blackpool as an example, I have an excellent dial-a-ride charity called Rideability. One needs to be a member of Rideability to access its services, and any member who has a concessionary now card with a blue stripe, signifying that they are a member, can obtain a half fare on the services. If you are a disabled passenger with an orange now card that is issued by the authorities locally, you can, on the payment of 50p, obtain any single passenger journey that you wish. In Lancashire, however, the situation is slightly different. There, it is mileage related. One pays £2 for any distance up to 2 miles, stretching right up to paying over £10 if one's journey is over 18 miles or more. And even as we speak, I understand that Blackpool Council is reassessing whether it wishes to continue funding the Rideability charity, which it subsidises to the tune of £112,000 a year. One very possible option that they are seeking to adopt is to reduce access to between the hours of 11 AM and 3 PM, when the council's existing vehicles are not being used by other forms of special transport needs. And my fear with that is it restricts individual freedom. It certainly restricts spontaneity. I'm not sure I would wish to live my life only between the hours of 11 AM and 3 PM. Now, I do realise that what I am proposing will be interpreted by many as a spending commitment, certainly perhaps by the government. And indeed, I'm often contacted by pensioners who say to me, "Why have I been given a concessionary card when I don't need one? I can afford to pay my own way." And I often reply to them, "Actually, you are not obliged to use your concessionary travel card. It doesn't stop you, if you wish to, paying your own way." And indeed, that might be a very sensible way if the government is concerned about how to fund this extension to actually move forward. And as to the issue of the government's current enthusiasm for de-ring fencing spending, I have to say that I note that they have ring-fenced 10 million to local government for local community transport schemes, so they have already established a slight predisposition towards this sector already. And I also note the words of the Community Transport Association, who write that, and I quote them, "Any person unable to make use of their concession on existing eligible transport services as a result of disability, age or other limiting factor should be permitted to use it on other transport services, with the operators of those services being reimbursed by the administrators of the local concessionary travel scheme. All eligible passengers should receive equal access to services. However, the provision of this fair level of service to currently excluded individuals must not adversely affect the level or quality of service enjoyed by existing passengers." And that, I think, goes to the nub of the matter. This may strike some as an unwelcome, indeed unnecessary extension of a concessionary fare scheme. I would accept that it is not an ideal system at the moment by any stretch of the imagination. There are too many flaws and inconsistencies and perverse consequences, as anyone who has read the recent Transport Select Committee report into bus services will realise that more and more people do indeed have a concessionary fare card, but don't have buses that they are able to use them on. But I would suggest to honourable members present who don't agree with this proposal that what we are all that I am seeking to do is to ensure that the benefits that apply to one welcome section of the community actually apply to everyone, including those with particular complex mobility problems, that this is not an issue of bus policy or indeed of wider transport policy, but actually simply a matter of human dignity.
Yeah.
Order. The question is that the honourable member have leave to bring in his bill. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Who will prepare and bring in the bill?
Julian Huppert, Mr. Paul Goggins, Mr. Mark Lazarovich, Mr. Lee Scott, and myself, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah.
Paul Maynard.
Concessionary Bus Travel Amendment Bill.
Second reading what day?
24th of February 2012.
24th of February 2012. Thank you. We come now to